six inhabited continents. I have stood in Normandy at sunrise. I stood in Tunisia beneath the rows of white marble crosses. I stood in Sicily, in Rome, in Manila, and in Belgium, where the silence seems to carry a memory. And I can tell you this with absolute certainty. Memorial Day is not about a long weekend. Though we appreciate it, Memorial Day is not about the long weekend. It's about remembering those who never got another one. Across America today, families will gather around grills and lakes and celebrations, and there's nothing wrong with joy. In many ways, joy is part of the freedom our fallen have defended. But before we move into the celebration, we must first pause with a measure of gratitude, because every freedom we enjoy today has been purchased by someone who wore the cloth of this very nation, but never made it home. That is why Memorial Day matters. Veterans Day honors all who serve. Memorial Day honors those who died in service to our country. And that distinction deserves our reverence. At American Battle Monuments Commission, our mission, Mr. Mayor, was to ensure that time never dims the glory of their deeds. And that, what started off as a motto, became a promise. A promise that Americans buried on foreign soil would never be forgotten. A promise that sacrifice would always have meaning. A promise that future generations would remember the cost of liberty. When you walk through American military cemeteries overseas, you quickly realize something very, very powerful. The fallen are not buried by politics. They're buried by service. Whether they be black or white or Hispanic or Asian, Native American, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whether they be rich or not, whether they're from the country or from the city, different backgrounds, different stories, but in death, they stand united beneath one flag. That is America at its best. The Texan Audie Murphy showed the world what courage under fire looked like. But Memorial Day also reminds us of those who never returned home from the battlefield at all. One of those such heroes was Doris, also known as Dorie Miller, from Waco, Texas. Dorie Miller was a mess attendant on board USS West Virginia during the attack at Pearl Harbor. He was never formally trained to operate an anti-aircraft weapon. He would eventually end up manning that morning. And I just want to remind you that it was not just not long ago where someone like Dorie, because of his ethnicity, was not allowed to get into the professional ratings, into the professional jobs. Nonetheless, when chaos erupted around him, he did not run. He's from Texas. He didn't run from danger. He carried wounded sailors, including the commanding officer, to safety. He helped move others who were already dying to the medical facilities. He also got behind that gun, though he wasn't trained. Again, he was from Texas, and went to work against all of those kamikazes that were coming in and coming in to attack his ship. At a time when America had not yet fully recognized his humanity, Dorie Miller chose to defend her anyway. That is patriotism. That is courage. That is sacrifice. And in 1943, during combat operations in the Pacific, Dorie Miller was regrettably killed when the USS Liscome Bay was torpedoed and sunk. See, for those of us who signed that document, who signed that check willing to fight, your reward for making your way through one battle was to go to another. And regrettably, that is where Dorie Miller paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I've had the honor of visiting his commemorative site at the Punch Bowl in Hawaii. There are also local sons and daughters in communities like Prairie. Young men who kissed their mothers goodbye and never returned. Young women who wore the uniform with pride and died serving something even greater than themselves. Some of the names are etched into memorials in various different places. You know, as I think about that, not just Dorie Miller and those without a name, Many of us here are old enough to remember someone recently who we are also commemorating. For me, it's Heath Robinson. Heath Robinson and I were training as he was preparing to go into the Navy SEALs program. We were training together. We became friends. And regrettably, during a combat operation, he gave his life. But by show of hands, let's see, how many of you know someone, perhaps in the Long War, perhaps in Vietnam or Korea, someone who passed away? Just let me see the palm of your hand. I invite you to think about that person. Someone who gave of that ultimate sacrifice, and just say their name quietly to yourself. The same as I'm saying Heath Robinson's name today. See, there are some names that are on the etched memorials, and then there are some that only survive in fading photographs, folded letters, and memories of aging family members. But today, we speak of them all. Again, say that name to yourself. Man, that's how we keep them. That's how we keep them alive. Say that name to yourself. Say it out loud. That's how we keep their memory going. Memorial Day is not about celebrity. It's about devotion. Behind every name etched in stone was a human being with dreams, fears, loved ones, and unfinished plans. Some were barely adults. Some had children waiting at home. Some never saw the futures they still fought to protect. Yet they went away. Not because they hated the people in front of them, but because they loved the people behind them. That is the heartbeat of military service. And today here in Grand Prairie, we honor that heartbeat. We honor the local sons and daughters whose names will be read aloud this morning. We honor the families who still carry their memory. We honor the empty chairs at dinner tables that have never stopped being noticed. And because when America loses a service member, that sacrifice doesn't just end on the battlefield. It echoes for several generations. Gold Star families understand that reality in ways many of us never fully will. Say that name. So today, every mother who pressed a folded flag into her chest, to every father who buried a child too soon, to every spouse who rebuilt life after a loss, to every child who grew up with memory instead of presence, this nation owes you more than applause. It owes you remembrance. Say that name. Remembrance requires responsibility. It requires us to teach the next generation that freedom is not automatic, democracy is not self-sustaining, and stability is not guaranteed. Every generation must decide whether it will merely inherit liberty or protect it. The men and women we honor today already made their decision. They answered the call. Some volunteered, some were drafted, some knew exactly what they were getting into, and others did not. But they carried the same willingness and sacrifice to something greater than themselves. And that willingness built this nation, and we are wise if we continue to sustain it. Say that name, and then say it again tomorrow. And say it again as long as you remember, so that we can pass on the honor that goes with service. As the bell rings today for Grand Prairie fallen, let it ring not in remembrance of death, but in honor of devotion. Devotion to duty, devotion to country, devotion to one another, because Memorial Day is not ultimately about how they died, it's about how they lived. With courage, conviction, with service before self, may we live our lives worthy of their sacrifice. Say that name. May we never forget their names. And may God bless the family of the fallen, the veterans who continue to serve and carry those invisible burdens. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kemp, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your service. Appreciate you. Let's give another round of applause. I would now like to welcome Mr. Ray Bush.